Andrew's agreed to take a few questions, probably for 10 minutes or so. I'm sure there must be some around the audience. So, black sweater here first.
I was interested in the plastic bags for running through the desert. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so sand is the mortal enemy of the feet. If you go and run around the Sahara Desert, or even if you just go to the local beaches and stuff, you're almost bound to develop blisters if you run far enough. So what you're looking to do is to prevent that sand causing friction between the toes and getting in between the actual shoe and your skin. So if you wear something that actually prevents that sand getting in and permeating, then your feet might sweat like a zoo, and they might stink quite a lot, but you're much less likely to get blisters. So there are specific gaiters or sand gaiters you can use rather than necessarily plastic bags, but plastic bags would be a cheaper alternative.
Simple solution. Right, Phil's been fine.
I'll be fine.
Any more questions? Just thinking about...
At the back? Is there one up there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think any of these guys at the sort of top level who are doing all this stuff on a purely vegetarian diet, or is when you get that kind of level, do you have to take on some sort of meat for the endurance kind of thing?
Well, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the short answer, yes, there are vegetarians at the top level in endurance sport. The one thing that these guys are really predisposed to getting is iron deficiency. And if you're doing more than 100 miles per week, on average, 40% of athletes will be iron deficient and 60% of female athletes will be iron deficient. So if you are falling into these sort of categories, it might be well worth your GP or checking with your GP if they'd mind checking your iron levels. Because if you supplement with that, it'll increase your performance massively. So if you're a vegetarian, it's less easy to get these food sources in, but you can do it in different means, and you can also take it as a supplement. So guys such as Scott Jurek is one of the best ultra runners, and he eats nothing except for nuts, pretty much.
I should also point out that there's very few rugby players that I've come across that are vegetarian.
So good question, though, thank you.
I'm here.
What's the best way to keep motivated as you get older?
Well, I think
Peter, I'll send you a copy of T.S. Eliot's quote.
it was the great philosopher Kylie Minogue that said, "You're never too late, you've still got time." And this guy such as Fauja Singh, who's 101 years old, that's just such an inspiring guy, who completed a marathon last year, but this year is retired to concentrate on his speed work. So, motivation is really difficult. I think the first step outside the door is always the most difficult. Sometimes I get up and I just cannot be bothered. But once you're out there, and I suppose once you got the wind in your face, then that's okay. So for me, the motivation is not always there. What do you think what do you find motivates yourself, or what's your top tip for motivation?
Beer.
Beer. Yeah, so if you've earned a reward, having something to focus on, like the finish line, remembering to smile at the finish and looking forward to that beer or that pint of custard at the finish, it's always worthwhile.
Last question, maybe? Yeah. Penultimate row there.
When did you start running?
Both of us?
When did you start running?
When did you start running?
Well, I think when I was growing up in Kenya, essentially either run or you run. So there's very little to do in terms of the usual sort of toys that you might have. I didn't have computers, didn't have all that. But in terms of actually running properly or running a bit more competitively, I played loads of sports when I was younger. As I said, I was pretty rubbish at most. But we were going to Everest Base Camp, and essentially one of my mates left some valuables a bit further up the trail. So it was getting a bit dark, so I volunteered to run back and get them. And I caught up with these guys who were running the Everest Marathon. They were just saying, "Oh, are you training for the Everest Marathon?" And I said, "Nah." "Is it on?" And they said, "Yeah." So I thought, "Oh, well, that sounds like it's worth a crack." But yeah, essentially, for those that are interested, if anyone would like, then essentially I've got books here that all profits for tonight, or any of the profits from the DVD from the documentary Going to the Sahara, will go to the Sick Kids tonight. So if you do want to know more about it, then you can either have a read about it. But essentially, I think everyone's got their own story. Tell us about yours, Phil.
Mine. How long have you got? No. I mean, for me, it's I've always been inspired by sport. I'm very passionate about being involved as a physio, as a sports scientist, and any opportunity I get to go out, get on my bike, I'll do so. And if that means going out at 5:30 in the morning, which I do quite regularly now, so I've got 2 young kids, then that's what I do. I'm very lucky in terms of motivation. I'm very motivated in what I do. But I have my off days as well, and sometimes I'll go out for 2-3 miles, and I'll say, it's not today. I don't feel good today. I feel tired or sluggish, and I'll go back, and then I'll try again the next day, and usually everything's fine. And that goes back to that, what we were talking about, recovery. I perhaps didn't give myself enough recovery, give myself another 24 hours, and I was feeling great. And I feel that a lot all the time. I see a lot of people who overtrain. Sorry, I'm waffling on a bit, but I see a lot of people who train day after day after day and wonder why they're not doing well, they're not improving, or they're getting sick, or they're getting injured. So to me, it's all about recovery. No, that doesn't answer your question, but...
Okay, folks, I think.
Question.
Okay, last question.
Do you see many different injuries between men and women?
It's a good point. In terms of running, perhaps just the hips, I think are more prevalent from running in females more than male. I think the prevalence of Achilles tendonitis, for example, is pretty even between 2. But yeah, just hips, because obviously the shape of female's hip is different to a male, so perhaps it's the reason why it's increased what we call a Q angle. So it's the angle that the femur goes across the midline, because the hips are generally wider in females than men. But that's about all.
Look, we're totally lucky. Essentially, if we're working in different sports, you'll see completely different injuries in different sports. Whilst it's obvious that you'll get different injuries in rugby as compared to golf, the injuries that swimmers get, the injuries that cyclists get, rugby players, it's fascinating. It's really, really interesting. There is some difference in acute injuries in females. So, for example, if you're a female football player, you are 4 times more likely to do your anterior cruciate ligament than if you're a male football player. But Phil's right, in terms of the overuse and the common running type injuries, they're reasonably similar.
Okay, folks. Can I just thank you 2 guys on behalf of the audience tonight. Phil, for organising tonight, for drawing it together, for the sponsorship ideas, and also for a great talk on the sort of biomechanics of running. Andrew, I think we've had a great talk from you. It's been great to get you here. As he said, he's got some copies of his books, his DVDs, and it's all going to charity tonight, so I encourage you to see him after the end of the session. But from all of us, thank you very much indeed.